Three things you need to know about new guidance when it comes to peanut allergies. Those allergies, as you know, can be life-threatening: impaired breathing, tightening of the throat. Some people even go into shock. Childhood peanut allergies more than tripled in the U.S. between 1997 and 2008. So that brings us here to thing one tonight. Where did the surge in peanut allergies come from? Well, according to the Northwestern University School of Medicine, overall, we're living cleaner than years past. Some scientists believe it can cause our immune systems to overreact to what's normally harmless proteins. Also in America, peanuts are likely to be roasted, which can actually change its proteins. That can make our immune system more likely to create allergy-causing antibodies. But experts say one of the main contributors was up until the late 90s, most parents would start feeding their babies solid foods whenever it seemed right, even foods that were known to cause allergies, like peanuts. But in 2000, the American Academy of Pediatrics issued a now outdated recommendation telling parents to avoid feeding kids peanuts until at least 3 years old. So that brings us to thing two: science changes. In 2008, after those recommendations came out, doctors found babies in Israel developed peanut allergies 10 times less than babies in the United Kingdom. They found babies in Israel were eating peanuts, but in the UK, parents were waiting several years. After that, the landmark Learning Early About Peanut, or LEAP study, was done and found of the children who ate peanuts regularly, only 3% developed an allergy by age 5. But the kids who avoided peanuts, 17% developed a peanut allergy by that same age. That is close to an 83% difference between those two groups. And finally here, thing three, the new guidance on how to help reduce the risk of an allergy from ever developing. The American Academy of Pediatrics now recommends parents start giving peanut products to children around 4 to 6 months of age. Doctors say start small, gradually increase the amount. Researchers recommend parents work up to 6 grams of peanut products every week until the age of 5. Doctors say there's also things like peanut flour that can help introduce peanut products to babies safely. All this, of course, a good conversation to have with your pediatrician. Coming up next here.